Thanks, Lasciam Corla. Yeah, look, I spoke on the budget on Tuesday night, and as I said then, the net fact about this budget, despite lots of highlighted figures and talk of unprecedented expenditure, the net fact is the majority of workers, pensioners, social welfare recipients, people with disabilities, vulnerable, low and middle income households, all will be worse off next year than they were last year, because the measures taken have not protected people from the spike in the cost of living and the ongoing housing crisis, the crisis in terms of extortionate rents, extortionate house prices, and of course homelessness. That is the net fact. No matter what way you try and dress it up and spin it, people will be worse off. And one-off payments that slightly mitigate that for a few months will not hide that fact as we head into the new year. But I do want to zone in today on a few more specific issues. First of all, how is it acceptable that the much trumpeted 80,000 new recipients of the fuel allowance will not get the €400 payment before Christmas? Will not get it. That is not acceptable. The government have been forced to accept that those 80 or 90,000 people need fuel allowance. They've been forced to accept it because of protests and pressure, but because they are not going to actually give them the fuel allowance till January, they will not get the €400 payment. They need it every bit as much as those who are going to get it, but they're not going to get it. That's not acceptable, and the government should rethink that one. How is it acceptable that those in receipt of job seekers benefit, illness benefit, enhanced illness benefit, maternity benefit, disablement benefit, in other words, people who are not long-term recipients of social welfare payments but short-term recipients, will currently get no fuel allowance, the vast majority of them will get no lump sum payment and will get no Christmas bonus. How is that acceptable? Where's the help for them to deal with this excruciating cost of living crisis as we head into the winter months? They're going to get the bill hikes the same way as everybody else, but they're not going to get any assistance at all in terms of the payments that are being given out and much trumpeted by the government. That is not acceptable. Another small but important issue for those that are affected, the abolition of the infamous Croke Park hours, the austerity hours imposed on public sector workers, finally abolished. But I have discovered that, among others, service officers here in the Dáil, and I think the ushers and other similar grades, will still not get the return of their overtime payments based on the abolition of those hours, but overtime will still only be calculated on the same divisor, as it's known technically, as if the Croke Park hours still existed. Now, when you consider that very regularly the service officers and the ushers in here are asked to accommodate culture nights or late night activity in the bar, is it fair that they are not getting what they are fully entitled to in terms of overtime payments, which should have come back with the abolition of the Croke Park hours? I suggest the government look into that, because we often rightly praise the staff who keep this place running, and there may be many other public sector workers affected by similar grades, by the way, by this. If the hours are gone, then the restoration of overtime payments should be returned. But the biggest failing, as I debated with Minister English on the radio this morning. The biggest failing, shocking, disgraceful failure of this budget is in the most severe aspect of the cost of living crisis, the ongoing housing and homelessness crisis, the crisis of unaffordable rents and house prices. And it's difficult to know where to begin with how this budget has failed. Very importantly, as I've highlighted and I will continue, the failure to raise the income thresholds for social housing eligibility means that people who got a marginal, for example, the people who got €4 extra a week with the tax band changes, may now find a very bitter sting in the tail of this minimal, pathetic increase in their income. They will now be flung off the social housing list, as has been happening to thousands of people over the last number of years because the government have not raised those thresholds, despite promises. And worse than that, they won't either be entitled to housing assistance payment. So they go a few euro over the threshold and now they've no help, even though they haven't got a prayer of being able to afford the rents out in the open market or buy their own home. That is outrageous. It is outrageous that €5 billion has been put in the rainy day fund, whereas at the same time, you look around all the SHDs that are being built, all the apartment blocks, they're not being bought by ordinary purchasers, they're being bought up by investment funds, who then rent them at extortionate rents, and often the state pays anyway through HAPS, RAS and leasing arrangements. Why on earth would you not use that money to buy up that property and the vacant and derelict property and the tenancies of people who are being evicted into homelessness? That would save those people the housing misery they're suffering and homelessness, but it would actually save the state money in terms of HAPS and RAS payments. Why will you not do it? Why will you not impose rent controls? And why will you not stop the profiteering of both the vulture landlords and the energy companies?
Thank you.